So oftentimes in entrepreneurship, God speaks to us in the most unexpected times, the times when we least think about it. The highest of highs, the lowest of lows, He is always there and He never leaves us and He never forsakes us. In today's story, we hear Cheri talk about how He spoke to her on her journey of entrepreneurship that started as a kid, battled through this journey. And it's one that I hope that we can see ourselves in, no matter what the label is, whatever our sin is, whatever our brokenness is. How do we stare that villain, that evilness, that brokenness in the face and recognize that God has called us to something different, that He has saved us for something more? So let's hear the rest of Cheri's story this week on the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur podcast.
Here's to the bold visionaries, faithful disruptors who make God the goal. While some may call them crazy, we see a call to create. God has empowered us to take righteous risk, solving the world's greatest problems, under His power, for His glory. Welcome to the Faith-Driven Entrepreneur podcast.
All right, so Cheri, first of all, I hear that you like this sport, and I'm going to call it a sport, okay? Because I'm a little bit intimidated by the sport. I've got this father-daughter event coming up, and I was all in. I'm excited about it. But then I heard that they're roller skating. And I'll admit, I grew up in Michigan, skating okay, but roller skating throws me off my game. But I hear that's one of your favorites.
I do like to play roller derby.
Roller derby?
Yes.
Okay, so we've escalated.
So,
We're
yes,
not just
yes.
off of pushing
it's like football on skates.
Okay, what's the story? How'd you get involved in roller derby?
You know, honestly, you talked about scars and pain earlier before we got on to this podcast. And when I got into roller derby, I kind of needed the physical pain. It helped me to relieve that emotional pain as I was going through my journey. And the girls on the team just really helped me learn how to fail and be okay with failing. It helped me with my perfectionism. I was really shocked when people would start clapping and cheering after I fell. I'd be like, but no, I fell.
Yeah.
They're like, no, if you're not falling, you're not trying. And then body positivity, just the way that everybody just owned the skin that they were in. It's something that I needed, coming from being a cheerleader and being a high achiever and all the perfectionism. Roller derby really helped me become the true version of myself.
Roller derby. All right, that is a great place to start. So I love, and one of the things that we're going to point to often today is an incredible story that you were able to share, just your vulnerability, transparency, just how God's worked in your journey. And love that. People have seen that already in Faith-Driven Entrepreneur content. Would encourage you, if you haven't seen it, to check it out. But I'd love for you just to take us into that for people that aren't familiar with it. Sounds like you've kind of already launched into it. Growing up, just kind of what was life look like on the outside? What was happening on the inside? What were some of those early entrepreneurial moments for you?
So life on the outside looked really great. We lived in an awesome neighborhood. I had a God-fearing dad and a very beautiful mother, and I was a cheerleader and in sports. My first entrepreneurial venture was I made bookmarks out of yarn, and I went door to door and sold them.
Okay.
And that was in second grade. And I'll never forget, one guy opened his door and he was like, $2 for some yarn? And that was my first example of having to look at I didn't know it was a P&L at the time, but I went back home and I was talking to my friend. I'm like, okay, so the whole thing of yarn is like $2. So I guess the guy had a point. Why am I selling a string of yarn braided for $2? And so that was my first real entrepreneurial light bulb moment. But when I was about 16 years old, I had a neighbor, and it was a guy who he dropped out of high school. I don't like using bad or good labels, but he was kind of the bad boy. And we were just chatting, and he said, hey, your dad smokes, right? And I was like, smokes? My dad would never smoke. He hates cigarettes. And he was like, no, he smokes. And I was like, weed? My dad is against anything illegal. He'd never do that. And he was like, no, meth. And I said, well, what's meth? And he was like, ice. And I said, I don't know what that is. And he was like, well, it makes you lose a lot of weight really fast, makes you really productive, like you can't sleep. And I was like, well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I'd like to try it, but if it's illegal, my dad wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
And he was like, Cheri, it's 11 o'clock at night, it's raining, and your dad's mowing the lawn. Your dad is smoking meth.
Hmm.
And so I went on a journey to find that drug and try the drug. And I will say that that was my next entrepreneurial venture. I became my dad's drug dealer. And, there's a lot of trauma that comes from that. At the time, I just felt like I was a resilient daughter who was doing whatever I needed to do to survive and make sure that bills were getting paid. And it was certainly not a life that I'd ever want to live again. I was so young, so I didn't have a lot to lose. But anything I did have, I lost. I got kicked off the cheerleading team, barely graduated high school, living out of my car, because I wasn't even old enough to have my own place. And I was in places that I shouldn't have been, and I was in a lot of situations that no girl my age should have been in. And I did end up turning it around and picking myself up by the bootstraps. I don't like using that term because it doesn't work. I needed to have grace, and I needed people to nurture me, and I needed the empathy. I needed a 12-step program. I needed rehab. But instead, outside of God, I was seeking validation through achievement and success. So I got sober from meth. That doesn't mean everything else, but I got sober from meth, and I went on my merry way of becoming as successful as I could become.
Entrepreneurs, we're so self-driven, we're so motivated, we're so hard-charging. I think one of the phrases that I've been struck by that entrepreneurs have this reaction to is this idea of we're designed to be dependent. And it sounds like you've kind of gone through that journey with that pick up the boot by your bootstraps kind of mindset. We kind of have that born into us of no, I can do it. We can do it. When's the point that you came to realize that you couldn't do it, that you need the program, that you need the steps, that you were designed to do that with friends, partnership, program, whatever it might be?
A long time later. So I got a job in the newsroom, even though...
By the way, tell the story about how you got that job, because that's one of the more creative resumes I think I've ever heard.
Yes. Well, I had no choice because a friend had told me, they were like, Cheri, every pretty girl getting out of high school that wants to be on TV is applying to be a news reporter. At a minimum, you need to get a college degree in journalism or something, a minimum. And I had no college education, and I didn't plan to. So I just kept applying and being creative and trying to create my own demo reels from my own fake little news station in my little apartment. And I finally just was like, I'm at the end of my rope. I called Pizza Hut, which is across the street from CBS 11, and I asked them if I emailed them my resume, if they'd print it and put it face down on the pizza box and write on the back of it, if you hire me, I will deliver, and take it to the hiring manager at CBS 11. I'd give them a good tip.
Yeah.
And so I got the job.
That is a very generous, Pizza Hut delivery person to go to that length. That's great. That's a partnership right there.
Yeah. I needed it. And so working in the newsroom really gave me the thrill of the highs and lows that I was missing from the drug addiction. Listening to all those scanners and trying to be the first person to find out that something was happening and sending a reporter and a photog out there. It really worked for me. While I was working there, I invented a product. I worked the overnight shift, and I worked with China to get a product invented. It was a tanning bed called Luminous Envy, and I got a patent. And I always tell people my patent is my degree, and my manufacturing cost was my tuition. And that business was not successful. It depends. I'll use air quotes, successful.
Yeah.
I got media coverage. I was a 20-something-year-old girl who invented a product and had a patent. It was As Seen on TV, and I sold it nationwide. So I sold all of my inventory. So I set out to do what I needed to do, but I didn't know how to price my product. So I learned really quickly through failure, and I had to learn the difference between wholesale and resale and cost price.
Yeah.
So after I invented that product, I did end up leaving the newsroom and I got into PR. And because I realized, like, I was good at getting my friends on the news without my news director knowing they're my friends. That's essentially PR. So I'll help companies get on the news. And so I was working with a client, and for some reason I felt the need to tell him I used to smoke meth. Like, I hadn't told anybody. He was just like, man, you've done so much in such a little amount of time. How have you become so successful so quickly? And I was like, well, you wouldn't believe it, but I used to smoke meth. And he was like, what? And in my mind, I was like, why did I say that? And he was like, man, you should tell your story.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah, I don't think that's really something to add to my resume. I don't know if it's going to help me. And he was like, well, it will help other people. And I was like, okay, I don't know. And he said, well, how about you just volunteer for the prison entrepreneurship program? And I was like, prison entrepreneurship program. And that's when I thought, man, I can find people who are just like me, resilient, willing, know what to do when their back's up against the wall. And I admit, and I always admit whenever I share my story, that when I went into the prison entrepreneurship program, I had the wrong mindset. I was trying to duplicate what I have done for myself, which is seeking validation through success and achievement. I thought, okay, I'll fix other people the way I've been fixed. I was not fixed. I was broken.
Did you know that at the time?
I didn't know that.
Okay. No indicator lights of like feeling like this emptiness of like one achievement begets another achievement?
No.
Okay.
It was working till it didn't. It was working. It fueled my pride. It fueled my ego. I didn't know. I didn't know I was missing something. I just thought that that's just the life that I chose. And like you said about entrepreneurs feeling like they just have to pull through, I felt like my life was supposed to be hard, and that I decided to take a hard route, but I was built for it. And so I was going into prison, and I was looking at people's business plans and helping them with their go-to-market strategy. And a couple of years goes by, and I start getting Facebook requests from people who got out of prison. And the first guy that I helped, his name was Benny, and he was just kind of moping around, and I was like, "What's the matter?" And he was like, "Well, I got a job." And I was like, "Well, why are you sad about it?" He was like, "Well, I mean, I'm a dishwasher guy, and it's gonna pay $8 an hour. I just feel like I can do so much more." And I was like, "So do more." And he was like, "I can't. I'm a felon. Everyone tells me that if you're a felon, you just got to take what you can get." And I was like, "Well, I was told that I couldn't get a job in the newsroom without a college degree." Like, at the time, I was thinking, all you have is a little felony. Like, who cares? Like, I didn't think anything of it. I was very naive. And I was like, "What do you want to do?" He said, "Cheri, you see those murals?" And I was like, "Yeah, like the ones in Deep Ellum." He said, "Yeah, I can do that." And I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, look at my art." And he showed me all his art from prison. He taught himself how to draw because he spent 20 years in prison. And I was like, this work is amazing. And so he hadn't used Google before ever in his life because he spent 20 years in prison. And I was like, "Here, let me show you Google." And so we went to Google, and I typed in mural painting company.
Wow.
And I called the number, and I was like, "Hey, my name is Cheri. I'm sitting next to this amazing artist. He actually wants to just get his foot in the door. He wants to learn through entrepreneurship because eventually he wants to be an entrepreneur. And I don't know what you hire your painters. His work is great. I see the work on your website. It's comparable. And he's willing to take $10 an hour." And the guy was like, "Okay, what's the catch?" And I was like, "Well, he just got out of prison for murder, but he's a big old teddy bear. You'll love him." And I said, "Tell you what, we'll meet, and we'll go to a Starbucks. We'll be in a public place. If you don't hire him, no harm, no foul. But can you at least give him some experience to interview?" Benny ended up getting hired on the spot. He was putting on his Facebook, he was taking selfies and showing all these videos, and I thought, yes, it's working. I can take people who want to hustle till their haters ask if they're hiring. It's working. And it did. Benny, fast forward to today, does very well. I'm still in contact with him. That was 10 years ago. The people that God still used me, even though
100%. Yeah.
even though I didn't know I was being used by God. I was getting in his way, I'm sure of it. But I became like Oprah of the halfway houses. I was going to the halfway house, and I was like, you get a job. Now you get a job. What do you like to do? Let's go to Google.
Yeah.
And then that's when I decided to Google how to start a staffing agency. And that's when Cornbread Hustle was born. Now, remember, I told you I was broken.
Mm-hmm.
I was pouring into other people while filling myself back up with alcohol. So after I got Cornbread Hustle off the ground and I had a few people working for me, I did get arrested. I got arrested. I'm the CEO of a person that is helping people with second chances. So I was like, wow, this isn't a good look. And
When was this?
This was 2017.
Okay.
November of 2017, I believe. And so I got out of jail and I thought, it's just going to be a slap on my wrist. Like, I was justifying it. Everybody drinks and drive. I just happened to get caught and I have a really hard job. I was justifying it any way I could because I really wanted to hold on to that comfort. It was like my blankie. Alcohol was. Like, I mean, I couldn't face all the feelings and the disappointment with my dad and the route that I took. I just couldn't face it. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know I was self-medicating, but that's what I was doing. And so a year went by. I'm on probation. I have a breathalyzer in my car. I'm homeless. I'm living out of my car, but not homeless in the way that you see like somebody under a bridge. I'm couch surfing.
Yeah.
And I did finally, on Christmas Eve of 2018, I decided to quit drinking and to give myself the gift of sobriety. I felt like, maybe this is a gift that'll keep on giving. I didn't know I would be here today, 6 years sober, and that it would last, but it did. And God helped me one day at a time. That is how I found God. The prerequisite was getting rid of the alcohol so I could even hear God talking to me. And so 1 year sober. So here I am, 1 year sober. God finds me. Well, I should say I found him because he always knew where I was at. In April, I got baptized. And when I was 1 year sober, COVID hit. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't. Like I've been through so much.
Yeah.
I had to get sober. Like this disease of alcoholism almost took me out. Now here we are with this virus. I was barely break even.
Yeah.
My company,
such loneliness and everything that hits in that
everything
season.
was horrible. Like I didn't even know, like, okay, well, that was a nice try. I was going to start a company, a staffing company, but now all these businesses are saying they're sending people home.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to place people with criminal records in jobs if all these places are closed? And so God gave me, it was totally God. I had this idea before, and that's how I know it was God, because it was before the N95 masks sold out and all the equipment sold out. I had this idea to hurry up and buy all the stuff. So I bought hazmat suits. I bought disinfectant spray. I got electrostatic spray guns. And I launched a website called CBH, Cornbread Hustle, cbhdisinfecting.com. And I started promoting that we would disinfect the workplaces. Because it was the only way we were going to stay, like, in business.
Yeah.
And so that was my first ever, first $100,000 I made as an entrepreneur. They always say, like, your first 100,000 is the hardest to make. But once you hit your first 100,000, then you're good. So we're cleaning workplaces, because if these warehouses think about how busy warehouses were shipping
Yeah.
because everybody was ordering stuff.
Nonstop. People moving around.
So there needed to be employees for the warehouses, but the owners of the company had to show that they're doing everything they can to keep the workplace clean. And this was when everyone was afraid of COVID, so they didn't know what it was going to do. So they were hiring us and paying us a lot of money to day and night, 24 hours around the clock, keep the workplace clean. And HR people and business owners started asking me like, hey, where did you get your employees? And I was like, I turn around, I have like the gas mask on because I'm cleaning toilets. I'm literally in a hazmat suit cleaning toilets. Joyfully, though, because I was making money. I was like the highest paid janitor you've ever met. So I'm cleaning toilets. I turn around, I was like, prison? Where do you get yours? And they're like, prison. So how do you get them to come to work if they make more on unemployment than what you can pay them? I said, well, they're not eligible for unemployment. They just got out of prison. And then that was my first $1 million I ever made as an entrepreneur because now companies were like, well, we need to hire some people who aren't eligible for unemployment. And so that's when we got our shot. And fast forward to today, we've placed almost 3,000 people with criminal records. That was when I was 1 year sober. So, I mean, that was like 7 years ago. Cornbread Hustle is going in its 9th year of business. I always get confused because I have a hard time considering the first 3 years of business a real business. I was just a drunk girl trying to find purpose.
When you look back on that, the way you're breaking this down in such framework and such matter of fact, has that always been your personality? Or has there been a gift of hindsight where you're looking at it with just clarity of like, hey, that's what that season was?
That's a really good question, and nobody's ever asked me that. Usually people just say, you have a lot of self-awareness. I think I have a very high tolerance for pain. And I've looked at my demons square in the face. I am in a season now in my life today where I'm not as interested in feeling the pain. And so I think because I was okay to look at the demons right in the eyes and write down my feelings and feel the feelings, I think I was pretty much dragging myself through glass. Every single scar, every single tear I felt all the way through. And now I'm in a season of actually feeling God's grace and his joy and believing that I deserve to and learning that I don't have to earn it like I have. Like I really had the mindset that I had to drag myself through glass in order to be allowed to enjoy my life. And so I think I've always been, I look back when I was still on drugs in high school and I had journals and I was writing down all my feelings. I don't know what God wants for me moving forward. I really don't. I'm in a season of letting go of control, which has been surrendering control has been harder for me than surrendering my addictions.
What do you mean by control? Push into that.
Manipulating things for the outcome that I desire so I don't have to feel the feelings, whatever that may be. Just wanting to jump in front of God's work and do something myself instead of let God do the driving.
Faithful versus willful tension,
Living by faith instead of by sight. Like even though God has been there for me and I've come this far, I haven't been able to really figure that out. I'll put it this way. I was really great at obedience. Most people, they trust then obey. I obeyed then trust. And that was a very painful experience that I'm just now coming out of. Because it was easy for me to obey and get all the hazmat gear. It was easy for me to obey and buy a junk hauling business. I got a junk business 6 months ago. Because God told me to for some reason. Junk removal, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
And I bought all the equipment. I spent like $120,000 on all of it. And I've just been really good at obeying, but I never trusted that I would that it would work out in a way that would serve me. I just trusted that I was being used to, I guess, obey. It was a
Yeah.
very hard, it has been the most eye-opening thing for me as a Christian. I didn't realize that that's what it is to be a Christian,
Hmm.
to wrestle with God, but still love God.
Hmm.
Like, I really, if somebody would have sold it to me that way, I don't think I would have signed up.
Hmm.
But I'm glad I did.
So you're talking about some of the most, society's perception of just like when you talk about the drugs you're talking about, when you talk about alcohol, you're talking about the control, how hard it is, the steps, the process, the intentionality that it takes to both free yourself from that and really kind of have that detox and then that resistance to it.
Mhm.
And yet here you are on this entrepreneurial journey. And what I'm hearing from you is that achievement and control are as big of a drug than those other things.
I'm willing to say worse.
How so? And I don't disagree. I think that most entrepreneurs, it's the drug we're so addicted to that we're unaware of it.
It's the illusion of control.
Hmm.
It's the illusion of control when it's really what's controlling you. And so I would urge anybody to write down a list of things that they feel they are controlling and see, is it an illusion?
Hmm.
And is this actually controlling me?
So how do you battle that? How do you battle this remarkable story of God's grace and not thinking that we're the main actor in it, taking credit for it, or falling into that idea of achievement, that idea of control in such a way that, that we don't lose sight of that? What does that look like? I hear the detox, but what's the creative resistance look like for you to making sure that doesn't take control?
It's a daily surrender. That's something else that I've had to learn is you don't arrive.
Hmm.
And all day, every day, just like I get triggered to want to drink, I can get triggered to want to be in control.
Hmm.
And that's why I'm saying control is worse than drugs or alcohol because the triggers are more.
Hmm.
The triggers are anything from needing to pee while you're in the middle of talking to somebody at a networking event and controlling yourself from excusing yourself. Like it's all day, every day, like staying in control of every situation you possibly can instead of just letting yourself be. We've become, I'm sure you've heard this, human doings instead of human beings.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could have read all the questions you were going to ask me today before I came here.
Hmm.
But as a surrender of control, I didn't. Instead, I asked God to tell me what we needed to talk about today, which control wasn't on the list, but I guess that's what your listeners need to hear about today.
Amen. It's fun how God does that. And like best laid plans and ideas and notes lead to a conversation I think is one that's often overlooked, needs to be had. And we don't realize, as you said, just how prevalent it is in that. I think if I were to connect this to kind of what you're doing and just kind of the work that you're doing that's so intentional and so impactful is, I think oftentimes we think that we're more in control than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about some of the people on the other side of that receiver when you're calling up and saying, hey, I've got somebody that just got out of prison for murder. Would you give them a chance? Like at some element, our ability to help others has to start with our realization of our own brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the wall that you have to break through to get an entrepreneur, a faith-driven entrepreneur, anybody to really kind of open their mindset to that?
Yes. So that's what I do basically day in and day out. I help HR professionals or business owners or entrepreneurs look at their own fears and their own beliefs.
Hmm.
And I explain to them that your beliefs are shaped by your experiences. So let's talk about some experiences you've had
Mm.
and why you have this belief that you don't want this certain type of felon or that certain type of person that has a criminal record. And then we talk about, so I wish I had like a whiteboard here. So you have your experiences. This is a circle. So picture a circle. We have experiences, beliefs. So our beliefs are shaped by our experiences. Then we have our behaviors. That's how we act, like if we're jumpy or scared,
Mhm.
because of an experience we had. And then action. Action is where we have the drug use, the affairs, getting arrested. And so it can work with anything in your life. As long as you're stuck in the action, which AKA control, you think it's an illusion of control. You're drinking to control how you feel, or you're having that affair because you're trying to control your own happiness because you're in an unhappy marriage. The only way to break out of going between the action and back to your beliefs, because those actions you do are going to reconfirm your limiting self-beliefs.
Mm.
It's like you're
Yeah.
self-sabotaging.
It's a self-sabotage
You're
cycle.
you're making it so your beliefs are going to be reconfirmed.
Yeah.
Just like an HR professional is making it so their beliefs are going to be reconfirmed by not stepping out in a new experience.
Yeah.
The only way to change our beliefs is to have a new experience. Now, what is in that new experience? Risk.
Mm.
And that's what we're afraid of. Risk, facing feelings, not having control.
Mm.
That's where there's no control, is a new experience. Just like a relationship. A woman who's been hurt over and over and over again, she's going to be more skittish and scared to be in a new relationship. Or she can just continue to get with unavailable men and keep that same limiting self-belief that all men suck because she keeps choosing that type of man. Or she can try a new experience and get with a guy that's going to actually treat her good. It might scare her. She might have to deal with some feelings. But it's the only way to change the cycle.
So what does that look like? I mean, are you calling up to an HR person saying, essentially, I'm having therapy and an intervention of just like all of what you just described that somebody's bringing to the table to then have them to this openness? Or are you finding that as a society, or maybe I'll put it this way, are we getting more helpful or more resistant to help in this conversation and giving people second chances?
I wish that I could say that it's just based on the empathy of people. It's really more so based on business needs. So that's the way that during COVID, my company was doing so well and we had so many open positions because there was a business need. People's hearts get a little softer when there's money on the line.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
When you remarked about going from 100,000 to 1 million.
Yeah. And then 1 million to 5 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it was very quick. But if a company is not, I will tell you that our most successful clients are the ones that call us because one of two things. They're either in recovery or have lived experience themselves, like a sister or a son or something like that. Or they see their company as a kingdom building company. And they know that helping people from prison is walking the walk as a Christian. And so when those people call us, they become great clients, and they're not coming to us because they need employees fast. Or because there's a workforce shortage. But the way that I go to everyday companies, if I cold call them or send them a message, I just say, hey, I see that you have a DEI program, or I see that you guys are very big into diversity. Is second chance hiring part of that talent acquisition strategy? If not, would you be open to a conversation so I can share our stats and case studies with you? So I don't just pick up the phone and I say, hey, let's talk about all your traumas and why you're afraid to hire somebody coming out of prison.
Yeah, we're taking it to an extreme. So I think the things that I'm struck by here is like, on one side, you're saying there's an empathy, and I'm grateful for that. But at the other side, sometimes the amount of empathy can overlook really the opportunity or some of those stats or the dependability of somebody really fighting for that chance. Can you talk about some of those stats that says like, hey, make the case on the economics, the numbers, the dependability, whatever it is might there, what are some of those key stats that people might be unaware of to this conversation?
Well, a recent study that I was made aware of is only 5% of HR managers say they actively choose people with criminal records as part of their talent pool, their talent acquisition strategy. So that means 95% of businesses aren't even looking at people with criminal records. It's just not even on the table.
Yeah.
It's not to say that they won't hire somebody with a criminal record, but they're not actively seeing it as a strategy.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two is 1 in 4 people have a criminal record. That's over 70 million people. That's a lot of people. And so I should say adults, not people, because there's way more people than that. So 1 in 4 adults have a criminal record. That's, well, 1 in 4. It's true in this case. I'm the one in here with a criminal record that I know of, right? And so there's just so many people that are looking for a chance. And you talked about empathy and outweighing the opportunity.
Overshadowing sometimes.
It could, but like what we do at Cornbread Hustle is we help somebody understand that you have to really manage the accountability and empathy. We have been doing this for 10 years. Just because we tell people all the time, just because you have a criminal record doesn't mean we're going to hire you. That's not, you having a criminal record doesn't mean we're going to help you. You have to be a fit for the job. We have to feel like you're going to represent us well. It's our liability. You're on our workers' comp. It's our problem if you go file a unemployment claim. So, and we only make money if you're successful. So we're literally putting our necks on the line for people that we have chosen to believe in. And so we have been doing this for so long that we have a certain list of questions. I will tell you this. Someone could come into my office with a misdemeanor of possession of marijuana, and somebody could come into my office with a murder or sex offense charge. I could be sending the person with the possession of marijuana home and choosing the person with the sex offense charge. It doesn't matter what their criminal record is to me. What matters is if they're a fit for the job and if I feel like they have truly done what they needed to do to have a new life. And that doesn't mean that they're not going to fail and trip up just like we do.
Sure.
Every single day, just like I do. I'm going through a season right now of letting go of control and surrendering to God. Now, my slip-ups don't look as bad as some of the slip-ups that we have at Cornbread Hustle. We have guys get arrested. We have guys get arrested at work sometimes just because they have a warrant. But it's such a step down from what was happening. Success is not linear. So for me, when I got off meth, even though I was sober from meth, I still got arrested like 10 times after that. Unpaid warrants, drinking and driving, just stupid little stuff. Because I still hadn't got the responsibility that I needed yet, and I was still learning and people were helping me.
Yeah. Can you talk about just this idea of like, there's a faith-driven company listening to this, and I think about times where the church has risen to the occasion of a challenge. We were actually just filming a story recently of some great work that's been done in the foster care side of things and adoption side, and just how the church had responded. And sometimes, though, that response can be so strong that we jump into it not really knowing kind of like what we jump into. If I'm a faith-driven entrepreneur company listening to this, I'm saying, gosh, you know what? I'm connecting with you. This is an opportunity. When I think about the things of ways that we can get involved, some things feel like they're way far off, or gosh, that's got to be for an organization or a company with 5,000 employees. But somebody's listening to this saying, you know what? This is something I can do. Walk people through the steps of like, what are those things? Like, what's the steps or what's the thresholds that people really need to get to a place where this can be really redemptive in their culture and not just feel like it's a bolt on?
Yeah. So we would start with a discovery call, and that's when we'd go over like, okay, let's talk about your fears. And a lot of times we'll help you form a criminal background policy. We have one client that I will gladly place somebody with murder charges, but not somebody with a pattern of theft. And it's because it's a place that has a whole bunch of copper and I don't know if you know,
Sure,
but
the
people,
temptation of it.
the
Yeah.
temptation, especially people who were addicted to hard drugs, a lot of times it could be a triggering environment, even just a reminder of the past.
Yeah.
Or if we have a client that pays a per diem and it's motel to motel, and they're like those kind of motels,
Yeah.
we're not going to have somebody that we're not going to suggest that we place somebody that has under a year sober from hard drugs, because then they're in an environment where they could be tempted. And that's to protect the people that we're helping as well as the client. We try to do our best to manage the responsibility that we have to the people we're serving.
Yeah.
So we'll form the criminal background strategy and policy, and then we ask for the job description and the requirements and what skills that they need, and then we will send them people that we feel are a fit, and we disclose everything. We have our candidates sign that we're going to do that. They know, they agree, we're advocating for them. This isn't to advocate against them. You know, they have banned the box or whatever, which actually isn't helpful at all, because a company can still decide not to hire you when they do find out you have a criminal record. So we're about, hey, let's disclose all of it up front.
Transparency, candor up
Yes,
front. Yeah.
we even put on our job descriptions what type of criminal charges we'll take for that role. And so we have one client, he's been amazing. He made almost $1 million in job offers in the last month.
Wow.
Yes. And that's what we would call one of our direct hire clients. So he hires them directly. They're not even on our payroll. And we just charge a fee for every person that we place, and we give a guarantee. Sometimes it's 10% of the annual salary. Sometimes it's 20%. It could be a 45-day guarantee or a 90-day guarantee. It just depends of the nature of work. But we find that a lot of companies that need like diesel mechanics, welders, any of those special skills, electricians, that's really great direct hire business for us. And then temp to hire is where they stay on our payroll. We're managing the employee, and we have like real hands-on approach.
Yeah.
That's where it's good for like the warehouse environments or call center environments. And that's where we just bill them weekly and just charge a markup of the hourly pay. We never take any money from the candidate. We just charge the client for our services.
So 2 questions kind of as we kind of come to a close here. One, when you talk about this idea of like some of the world's great problems, we can talk about so many of the things we talked about, from addiction and homelessness and other things, broken families and everything that's downstream. Can you just talk about the power of stability of employment and jobs? Like when we talk about the power of the gospel, we look at that as like, man, that is everything. And if we were to look at that, just talk about the power of what it does to a person, how it helps them walk through things when you have the stability and consistency of employment.
So it's life-changing. I know there's 3 different main things that people need for survival. I shouldn't say survival, but 3 main things: transportation, housing, and a job. Obviously food. But a job really comes first before any of those things are even possible. A lot of the people we serve get out of prison and they can stay at a halfway house. The halfway house does charge them money to stay there, but they give them grace until they find a job. So even if someone's homeless or in a homeless shelter, getting a job helps them get on their feet. Eventually, if they have a place to live, that job where they're riding their bike to or riding the bus to, eventually they can get a car. And the most important, obviously money is the number one most important part of a job. But secondly, the mentorship. Having a family, having people, you have to remember these people who got themselves in gangs. They were looking for a family. They're looking for validation. They want to belong. So whenever you allow somebody that is looking to belong to be part of your family, and you treat them with care and empathy, and you like more than just an employee, you actually care about them. You sit down and say, how's your day going? Hot dogs are great. Bonuses are great. Gift cards are great. But nothing's better than sitting down and saying, how's your daughter? And actually having a conversation with them. I will say, from my experience of doing this for 10 years, the very first employees I hired 10 years ago are still texting me almost every single day. And they are family. I see them as family, and I'm sure they see me as family. And I don't have to try to make that happen. I don't wake up every day. I'm like, oh, don't forget to text one of the 10 first guys that you hired 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's just become that way. So it's one of those things where, you can't fake it, obviously. You can't. Maybe you fake it till you make it, because it will fill your cup when you see somebody evolve and grow. But it does take patience, and it's not for everyone. You talked about foster care. A lot of times you'll hear about foster children running from love or running away or throwing fits or tantrums. This is just a form of self-sabotage, of feeling unworthy. People coming out of prison that have good jobs can do the same thing. I can't tell you how many times I had someone quit 2 days after a promotion. And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Or just they screamed and stormed out and slammed the door. They were quitting the job before the job could quit them. And so it's definitely, for me and for the employers that do a great job that we partner with, it's a mission. It's a mission. They're on a mission to help people live the best versions of their lives.
The compounding impact of what you're talking about is just, it's staggering when you think about it, to think about the price of somebody being helped 10 years ago, what they go on to impact in their community, their family, their kids, reconnecting with kids, just so much that's there that you can see. You said earlier that something to the effect of I just thought that I was supposed to deal with this much pain, deal with this much brokenness. There's something in that of how God's wired you, that you have the ability to kind of process through some very weighty and heavy situations. How do you reflect on that wiring and kind of where God has you? Do you feel like, hey, I didn't know it, but he was taking me through some of this weighty and this heavy stuff so that I could handle this kind of stuff of others?
I think that was a very interesting question. I feel like I made things harder for myself, and it's not the way God intended it. And I feel like I did a lot of feeling sorry for myself, and all the hard stuff was me punishing myself. I made everything harder because I felt unworthy and undeserving. And maybe because everything felt so hard, everything else that I've done was so hard that I felt like if I got something that wasn't hard, I didn't deserve it. I'm still on that journey. I still haven't come out of that. I'm working on it right now. It's part of that letting go of control. Like I said, that illusion of control. Maybe if I'm suffering and feeling all this pain, I've made it to where I deserved it. I do know, I will tell you this though. You mentioned my self-awareness ability. You're not the only person that's done that. It's every interview that I've had. I do believe that God gave me a gift to be vulnerable, to expose myself, to help others take the walls down so they can process their own feelings without having to say anything to anybody. And I also believe that God gave me the ability, I'm going to say desire, because I did have like I said, I'm coming out of it. I'm done. I don't want to look those demons in the eyeballs anymore. I think I stared at them a little too long. But I think God did give me that ability. So when I am in prison with the females that I'm with and males, because I was just in jail the other day, I can sit with them in their brokenness and actually bear it with them. I can shoulder it with them and be like, I know what it feels like. And being able to describe to them the feelings and the thoughts that only they felt like they had, and to let them know that they're not crazy. I had them too. I have them too. I help them understand that I'm walking with them and we're just all walking each other home instead of I'm in front of them or I'm behind them. No, I'm right next to them.
One of the things that we talk about is maybe as the last question here is we just talk about like the world's full of problems. Darkness is all around us. And yet when we think about pushing back darkness, maybe we've underrated the opportunity of entrepreneurship to solve some of those problems. We've often talked about ministries and doing great work to help survivors, to help people that are hurt, to help people through that brokenness. Can you just talk about like how you've seen the power of entrepreneurship and an economic engine to solve one of these big problems?
Yeah. I mean, well, my company. No, I see it every single day. So, and you guys aren't strangers to kingdom building, but I see people do God's work every single day, no matter what business they're in. The other day, I had a inspection from my insurance company that I was dreading, and the guy who showed up to do the inspection ended up praying over me and letting God speak through him to me. He made a difference just in his day-to-day job. The very first company that hired me when I first got off meth, they called me the other day and they brought some of my employees to help out with something. And I told them, man, thank you so much. It means so much that you'd hire these guys and give them a shot. And the guy had tears in his eyes because they hired me almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And he said, Cheri, he said, we don't put it on our website. We're not loud and proud about it, that we believe in God or that we serve our employees in the way that God would want us to. But seeing you go out and create a company and giving all these people a chance shows me that we made the right decision hiring you that day. I came in crying. I was literally coming off meth when they hired me. Like, there was no reason they should have hired me. They saw something in me and decided to give me a chance.
I think it's beautiful. It's encouraging to see more people doing it. It's encouraging to see more people giving that chance. I think it's incredibly encouraging to see the engine that you've built in this company and the team has built, and just the compounding impact that's helping so many other people. And so it's just, it's a gift. It's a gift to see you stare at those villains, to stare at those demons, to find ways in empathy, but also an opportunity, create positions for that. So as we come to a close here, guys, this week, it is great to just think about the ways that we can think about the redemptive impact that is sitting right in front of us. And whether it's how you might give, how you invest, how you hire, who you hire. I hope this episode just encourages all of us to really look to see what are the unique things that God has led us through and that he's leading us through, and how we can use that to be a help to others. So we just encourage you to find those ways that God has called you to say, what does it look like to get in the game and to make a difference? Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next week.